As war rages in both Europe and the Middle East, Donald Trump is encouraging Russia to attack our NATO allies. During a campaign speech in South Carolina on Saturday, Trump recounted a conversation he allegedly had with a fellow world leader while he was president.
By the way, it was one of those crazy, and someone stood up and said, "Sir, sir," and he said they were from a big country. Sir, if they don't pay, if we don't pay, what will you do, sir? Nobody's saying that.
Anywho.
Like, what a jackass. How stupid would you have to be in that audience to go, "Oh, wow, did he really say that?"
Yeah.
That's amazing. I can't believe a big country president would say that.
Anyhow,
but it was it's just stupid. Like, he is now so desperate to support Vladimir Putin and undercut America's allies in Europe, he's making up a "sir" story. Mm-hmm. It's not even a good lie for Donald Trump. Like, you can tell he's losing it. Like, he's losing his touch. This is when Elvis couldn't even he's so fat, he couldn't even get the scarf from around his neck to throw to the audience. He just kind of sat there and looked down and sang. Remember Heilman, when they had to hold the microphone?
Yeah.
For Fat Elvis when he was playing piano?
100%,
Because he lost all his moves. This is Donald Trump. It's a story that a third grader would go, "Why is he lying to me?" And the people in the audience, they can't be that dumb. To say, somebody, big country person said, "Sir, what if we don't?" Like, this guy will do anything to justify defending and supporting Vladimir Putin and getting us all ready for, this is the dangerous part, when he's president again, he's getting us ready for him to be an autocrat,
sure,
a dictator, and a guy who's going to tell Vladimir Putin, sweep in.
Play it before
you want to play it? Because I thought my imitation sounded, just, why would you want to play the tape?
I like Joe's imitation better. Why would we play the sound? Just stick with Joe's. It's the best.
Go, baby. Let's do this.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, "Well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us?" I said, "You didn't pay? You're delinquent?" He said, "Yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills."
Again.
It's like you're fired.
Again, well, it's just stupid because it's a lie. Nobody said that. What president? What president? Did President Merkel say that? Donald? Did President Theresa May say that? Did President Macron say? Who said that? I mean, John Heilman, I'm serious. It's so stupid. And the level of stupidity, like, to actually believe that story and cheer for it, really, it makes my teeth hurt. So mind-bogglingly bad.
I mean, just to say the thing out loud, heads of state, even of some not big countries, of small countries, heads of state don't refer to each other as like presidents call him "sir," as if he's like the White House usher, not the way they talk to each other. And I think, Joe, it's an interesting metric that you've introduced into our vocabulary. We should really think about this because as we chart Trump's decline, some of the things we should be monitoring are the quality of the lies as they become more transparent and dumber. That's one side of kind of terminal decline. Another is going to be when the nicknames start to go. When he starts like coming up with very late, he starts referring to Joe Biden as, Cheery Joe, or I don't know, he's going to have some bad set of nicknames. Like the nicknames are going to decline. That's another sign that that Trump has reached the final stages of ineptitude and political.
Okay.
Well, there's just no doubt. This is Fat Elvis at the piano. That's right. Where we are right now.
Next stop, right in front of the televisions in Graceland, where he's shooting out the screens on the TVs, right, with a shotgun.
It'll happen. That's coming.
Let's bring in MSNBC contributor and author of the book, How the Right Lost Its Mind, Charlie Sykes, and former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He's Chief International Analyst for NBC News.
Admiral, it's not like Donald Trump is trying to prepare us for the horrible things he'll do when he's president. He is. He's praising Orban. He says we need a strong man. He's telling us that. Says he's going to be a dictator on day one. he's telling us that. Here he's telling us he's going to encourage Vladimir Putin, a former Russian, a Soviet enemy, Vladimir Putin to just take over not only NATO, but not only Ukraine, but other NATO countries. I mean, talk about the dangers of this kind of talk becoming mainstream in American politics.
Terribly dangerous, and lives will be lost, particularly if he goes the next step and does something or attempts to do something truly foolish, ignorant, and that would be to pull out of NATO. I mean, let's just do the numbers for 1 second. NATO is 32 countries. It's 55% of the world's GDP. It's 3 million troops, active duty, well-trained, competent, almost all volunteers. It's got a collective defense budget of $1 trillion. And, oh, by the way, on the point of defense budgets, and back to the, sir, will you pay us, defend us if we don't pay? Well, again, let's do the numbers for a minute. U.S. spends $700 billion a year on defense. The Europeans collectively spend over $300 billion. It's the second largest defense budget in the world. That's more than China spends. And by the way, it's 3 times what Russia spends. And then the other part, Joe, and your rendition of it was pretty accurate, is just the condescension, the arrogance. John Howman's exactly right. I've been to 1 million NATO summits. I've never heard a head of state call another head of state anything but by their first name. And so you see Donald Trump treating NATO like it's a protection racket. You know, hey, you've got a nice little country here. Be a shame if something happened to it. It fails on every level, frankly.
Well, the Wall Street Journal editorial board is also weighing in on the ex-president's comments. The editors write, in part, Mr. Trump's riff also comes in the context of his lobbying against more U.S. military aid for Ukraine. He boasts about his admiration for Mr. Putin and his bromance with the dictator during the 2018 Helsinki summit was a low point of his presidency. Mr. Trump now says he'll end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, even before he's inaugurated. The only way to do that is to deny Ukraine more weapons and tell President Volodymyr Zelensky to give Mr. Putin what he wants. The word for that isn't peace, it's appeasement. The U.S. should be having an election debate over the growing dangers to U.S. security and how to counter them. Instead, we have an incumbent who has presided over the collapse of U.S. deterrence and a GOP frontrunner who dotes on dictators. No wonder Mr. Putin is looking so confident these days.
Well, the Wall Street Journal had to throw in that line just for its readers that Mr. Biden is like not discouraging deterrence. It couldn't be any further from the truth. What he's done in Ukraine is extraordinary.
What he wants to do. Just extraordinary how he's built that up. And the same with Israel. What's happened there? It's just we'll talk about that later. It's become such a mess with Netanyahu. But Charlie Sykes, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, for the most part nails it, talking about just how dangerous this is. And yes, talks about 2018 when Jonathan Lemire asked the question to Vladimir or to Donald Trump who he trusted more, and he said the Russians over his own intel community. But this is sinking even further for Donald Trump, and the Wall Street Journal editorial page is right. This is extraordinarily dangerous. His bromance with Vladimir Putin. Russian hoax? No Russian hoax. No Russian hoax. There continues to be an admiration there that makes America weaker, that makes America less safe, that makes Western democracy endangered.
Yeah, this is Fat Elvis, but it's Fat Elvis with nukes. I mean, we have to balance out the clownishness of much of this with how really fundamentally dangerous it is. And the Wall Street Journal is right. You have to put this in context. This comment over the weekend is not a one-off. It is consistent with what Donald Trump has been saying for years, what he has been signaling for years. And the rest of the world is listening to this. And You know, the way to start wars, of course, is to have miscalculations. And he is signaling weakness. He is signaling appeasement. He is signaling surrender. So there are real world consequences to the things that Donald Trump is saying. And of all of the things, you know, this is a very inconsistent, very erratic man. But one of the consistent things about Donald Trump has been his willingness to bow his knee to Vladimir Putin, to ask for favors from Vladimir
Constantly.
Putin. He will attack everyone in the world. I can't find any reference where he's ever criticized Vladimir Putin. And again, we have NATO watching. Our allies are watching. Vladimir Putin is watching. The Chinese are watching what Donald Trump is saying. And again, as the Wall Street Journal points out, this is not just an off-the-cuff remark at a rally. This comes amid his campaign to basically kneecap the aid to Ukraine right now. People ought to take this very, very seriously, because it feels as if we are sleepwalking into a global catastrophe while we're focusing on maybe some of the atmospherics of American politics. But this is real, and it will have real world consequences, as the Admiral said.
Jonathan, Charlie's so right, and the Wall Street Journal editorial page is so right. Not only is he saying that he's going to encourage Russia to invade our NATO allies, he's also actively right now working and intimidating Republicans in Congress to kill funding for Ukraine, to basically turn the country over to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, he already pushed them to kill the border bill, which would have had also the national security funding for Ukraine. That died. The Senate has taken some steps now to pass a standalone that'll have foreign aid bill, including a lot to Ukraine. But there's a real sense that even if the Senate does pass it, it won't get through the House, largely because Donald Trump has poisoned fellow Republicans in the House against helping Ukraine. Let's recall, right before Trump went to Helsinki in 2018, he was in Brussels at a NATO summit meeting and was this close to pulling the U.S. out then. We shouldn't doubt him when he says he will do it if he's elected again, giving Vladimir Putin free rein throughout Europe. So other reactions to this from over the weekend include from Republican Senator Marco Rubio, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee who has endorsed Trump for president. Well, yesterday he scrambled to try to defend Trump's comments.
I mean, he was talking about a story that he talked about happened in the past. By the way, Donald Trump was president, and he didn't pull us out of NATO. But he's telling a story, and frankly, look, Donald Trump is not a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. He doesn't talk like a traditional politician. But what he's basically saying is, if you see the comments, he said NATO was broke or busted until he took over because people weren't paying their dues. And then he told the story about how he used leverage to get people to step up to the plate and become more active in NATO. Virtually every American president at some point in some way has complained about other countries in NATO not doing enough. You know, Trump's just the first one to express it in these terms. But I have zero concern because he's been president before. I know exactly what he has done and will do with the NATO alliance.
First off, pretty pathetic. Secondly, a fact check. There aren't dues, NATO dues. Countries are encouraged to put in 2% of their GDPs. We have seen European nations pick up their level of contributions in recent years. And at least they've done so not because of Donald Trump's threats, but because President Joe Biden has revitalized NATO as it tries to stand together against Russian aggression. But yet it sure looks like Donald Trump is willing to help out his pal Vladimir Putin again. And a lot of Republicans, like Marco Rubio, just going to go along with it.
I have absolutely no problem with pressuring NATO countries to pay their fair share and to pony up, and so that we're not carrying the bulk of the burden. What I have a problem with is Republicans like Marco Rubio just letting Donald Trump say it's okay for Russia to invade NATO allies. That is so ridiculous, and it's such a contrast from the Marco Rubio of 2016 in the Republican primary, a former hawk who, can you imagine if he said any of that stuff then? And what we have heard from former Trump officials is that he is going to make good on his craziest statements next go round. That's what John Kelly's been warning. That's what John Bolton's been warning. He is telling us what he is going to do, and we should be prepared for that.
And let's remember, John Heilemann, the only time that NATO's Article 5, the Mutual Defense Pact, was enacted was to help the United States. Our allies were coming to our help after September 11th.
Right.
When he wasn't attacking NATO or slurring his words or confusing his opponent with Barack Obama, Donald Trump was launching new attacks against Nikki Haley on Saturday, questioning the whereabouts of her husband, Major Michael Haley, who is serving an active duty deployment in Africa with the South Carolina Army National Guard. Take a look at what Trump had to say, followed by Nikki Haley's response.
The greatest president in my lifetime, she said. I will never run against him. Then she comes over to see me at Mar-a-Lago. Sir, I will never run against you. She brought her husband. Where's her husband? Oh, he's away. He's away. What happened to her husband? What happened to her husband? Where is he? He's gone. He knew. He knew.
I need to start with the fact that Donald Trump had a rally today. And in that rally, he mocked my husband's military service. Donald, if you have something to say, don't say it behind my back. Get on a debate stage and say it to my face. I am proud of Michael's service. Every military spouse knows it's a family sacrifice. I have long talked about the fact that we need to have mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 75. Donald Trump claims that he would pass that. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But if you mock the service of a combat veteran, you don't deserve a driver's license, let alone being president of the United States.
Major Michael Haley also responded on social media, tagging Trump and several media outlets with a graphic that reads, "The difference between humans and animals? Animals would never allow the dumbest ones to lead the pack."
And
wow.
Mike Barnicle, how disgusting. This really reminds me so much of what he said to General Kelly, which is, you know, that soldiers that get killed in combat are suckers, and asking General Kelly, who lost a son in combat, why would anybody do that? Why would anybody do something where they got nothing in return for it? Again, just showing how shallow and how horrible the man is, ridiculing the dead, who dead American heroes. We know that he still ridicules John McCain, a dead American hero. He ridiculed him for being imprisoned in Hanoi for, I think, 7 years, for having the opportunity to come home, even when he was being tortured so badly that he couldn't raise his arms above his head. And John McCain said, no, I'm not going to leave without my band of brothers. I will not be the first out of here. And Donald Trump mocked that. Now he's mocking Nikki Haley's husband, who is in active duty service. I mean, there is a line that connects all of this. And again, I ask those people out there cheering when he's mocking an active duty service person, what's wrong with you? Why do you support that? Why do you support a guy that a judge called a rapist? Why do you support a guy that a jury accused of or found liable for sexual abuse? Why do you support a guy that tells Vladimir Putin, basically, please invade Europe when I'm president of the United States? I won't do anything.
You know, Joe, I might be wrong, but I believe he made those comments to General Kelly while standing at Arlington National Cemetery in Section 68. Which is filled with the graves and the headstones of people who died in Iraq and Afghanistan. Look, I think what we're watching and listening to, including the clip we just played of Donald Trump trying to make believe that Nikki Haley's husband perhaps left her when he's in Djibouti in East Africa serving with the United States military. I believe that we're watching the ultimate hole card that the Democrats have in their hands. And it is the length of the campaign that we are now witnessing. 9 months of listening to this man, 9 months of watching a man disassemble even further each and every day under the pressure of litigation, of having to go to trials where he could be found guilty of a felony, all of that. all of what he says, including what he says about NATO and his references to Ukraine and trying to stop the funding of a fight against Vladimir Putin, ignoring the history of what has happened in Europe over the last century. I mean, this is a modern-day version of 1939. And David Ignatius, unless Ukraine gets that funding, we could be looking at something truly horrific in Europe.
Well, Mike, Ukraine is really on the edge now. Unfortunately, after standing so united in the first year and a half of the war, there are increasing political debates within Ukraine, a country that, when I was last there in October, I wrote was exhausted. President Zelensky has just fired his commander-in-chief, who wanted to have a full mobilization to get enough manpower to fight off what he fears is going to be a new Russian attempt to attack and move west. It's a moment where Ukraine really hangs in the balance. And the idea that this is the moment when this glib, I've been thinking Trump's almost like an insult comedian. He rambles on for an hour looking for lines that will excite the audience. When he would drop this line about he'd encourage the Russians to attack NATO allies if they didn't pay up. I mean, it's just a stunner, and the effect on morale of the countries that surround Ukraine, on the people of Ukraine itself. I said this in our earlier conversations about Trump. He seems to have no idea of how long it took to build the structure that's NATO, the structure of security, all the sacrifices that went into it. There are several generations of people who worked and fought and cared to build it up, and he just thinks he can blow it over, in a few glib comments, and I fear that he may be able to if his base supports him. But it's just an awful feeling to see this glib, self-absorbed person take down something that's been so important in the world.
Yeah, and Elise, listening to David talking about how Trump could tear down something so quickly that took years and years and sacrifice after sacrifice to build up, people who lost their lives during the Cold War. I'm just so reminded of Edmund Burke, who talked about what true conservatism was and warned of radicals. And I will just say, like Donald Trump, radicals and people that are not detached to reality, that can tear down in a day what took centuries to build up. They can tear down foundational institutions in a day that took centuries of pragmatism and compromise to build up.
And they are able to tear down institutions that the foundations are obviously not that strong on, because other Republicans do not stand up against Donald Trump when he's making these statements. And you look at just the mealy-mouthed defenses yesterday on the Sunday shows, and it was just embarrassing. And not even personal defense for Nikki Haley when her husband, who's deployed in a very treacherous part of the world, is being attacked. And it just shows Donald Trump knows nothing about service at all, and he has no respect for anyone who would do it. And you look at someone, Nikki Haley is a powerful woman. She probably could have tried to finagle and maneuvered so her husband didn't have to deploy this year, but she didn't, because she is honorable. And it really is yet another example of Donald Trump disrespecting our national security and the men and women who keep us safe.
Tomorrow marks an early election litmus test. New York will hold a special election to fill the seat left vacant after Republican George Santos was expelled from Congress in December. The fight for New York's 3rd District kicks off the battle over control of the House and is expected to be an early messaging and turnout test for both parties ahead of November. Democrat Tom Suozzi, a moderate who held the seat for 3 terms before stepping aside in 2022 to run for governor, is facing Republican Mazi Pilip, who has little political experience, winning her first and only office in 2021 on the part-time Nassau County legislature. Philip is also an Orthodox Jew born in Ethiopia who served in the Israel Defense Forces and became an American citizen in 2009. The special election is providing an early opportunity to test party messaging and counter-messaging on top issues like immigration, abortion, and Israel's war with Hamas, which are expected to play major roles in races all across the country this fall. The winner of the special election will serve out the remainder of Santos's unfinished term in the House, which expires in 2025. And former New York Congressman Tom Suozzi joins us now. It's good to have you back on the show. Let's start with the easy one. Why do you want to go back?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show, Mika. Our country's in a lot of trouble. And if we're going to try and fix things, we need to change the messaging. It can't be the extremist, my way or the highway from the far right and the far left. It's got to be people working together to solve the problems that we face in our country. The things you've talked about on the show, they're serious problems. These are not games. This is real life. And we need people to get beyond this divisiveness and work together to solve the problems.
So, Congressman, as you sat down, we showed the front page of the New York Post, which is migrant crime wave. Some of the crime stuff is overblown, but there's no doubt that the migrant issue is a significant one in American politics right now. Tell us how much you're hearing about that in your district, suburban to New York City, but also whether you think, as a Democrat, you can make the argument that now the Republicans are to blame because they're the ones who submarined the border bill.
You're absolutely right. This is a very serious problem. People talk about it. People are concerned about it. And we have an opportunity to solve it. We can close the border. We can get money to New York State and New York City. We can get more border agents. We can build the wall. We can do all these things if we go with the Senate bipartisan deal that's been negotiated over the past 4 months. And instead of going forward with that deal, the Republicans are listening to President Trump, former President Trump, who's saying, don't give Biden a victory. I want to campaign on the chaos. And they're the ones who are keeping the border open. They're the ones that are endangering Israel. They're the ones that are empowering Putin by not doing this bipartisan deal. And people are sick of that type of politics. It's so cynical. As Mitt Romney said, it's appalling.
So you're running out in Long Island, suburban America, when a lot of suburban America is leaning Democrat. But you're running against a very powerful Republican entrenched machine in Long Island, and you're oddly enough a man of the middle, and yet you sound and seem out there like an agent of change in this election.
Yeah, that's what's really odd about this race is if you want to fix things in Washington, D.C., I'm offering you an antidote to try and come together and say, let's stop all the BS and let's actually talk about what the people care about. Whereas my opponent is just taking the Republican talking points. She's anti-choice. She's pro-guns. She doesn't want to do the bipartisan deal. And she's just being led around by the Republican machine that's very powerful. No question, it's a powerful machine. But I beat them before, and we're going to beat them again tomorrow.
I have two related questions. The first you'll probably be able to dispense with quickly. In the whole course of this campaign, how many times have you heard a constituent say, God, we miss George Santos?
No.
And second, if you win this race, you're going to have to run again in November for, you just get this little...
Nobody told me that.
Yeah, there you go. How do you feel at this point about the notion of running with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket in 2024 in November? How does that feel to you in your district? And how are kind of some of these larger questions about Biden and his competence, his age, and these things that flared up last week? How are those playing out in your district? It's going to be one of the swingiest districts in the country.
I'm really not thinking that far. The next 48 hours is really kind of a little bit of a focus, but sure. The president is underwater.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is underwater. Yeah. They're both unpopular because people are sick of the politics. They're sick of the game playing. They want us to actually work together to solve problems. We know what politics has become.
Yeah.
I'm trying to talk about what politics could be, which I've tried to demonstrate throughout my career as a mayor, as a county executive, as a member of Congress, that if we work together, we can actually fix some things. And that's not happening. When I was in Congress, I was the vice chairman of the Problem Solvers Caucus. 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans. Let's try and find common ground to solve the problems we face.
George Santos was clearly a disaster that reflected really badly on the Republicans in Long Island and New York State who helped elevate him. You're only ahead, though, by margin of error, 3-4 points. Why is the race still so close?
It's a very tough environment for Democrats on Long Island, but I think that my message is breaking through of working together to solve problems. My opponent, I wouldn't even have brought up George Santos in this race because everybody's so sick of that. But my opponent in this post-George Santos era is not being transparent. She's just taking these extreme positions, being led around by the party leaders, both from Washington and locally. And people don't want, how can you not be transparent in this environment? She wouldn't even say who she voted for president until yesterday or 2 days ago, I think it was, when she voted for Trump. She's anti-choice. She wants to keep guns on the streets. She won't ban semi-automatic weapons. She won't do bipartisan deals. She's just doing these Republican extreme talking points. I don't care whether Republican or Democratic. We don't want these extreme voices. We want people to work together to solve the problems we face.
And speaking of your opponent, she's been, shall we say, scarce in this campaign.
Absolutely.
You have, but we know that Donald Trump has offered his endorsement.
Oh, he has? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Donald Trump is also, we know, he carried Suffolk County even in 2020 and did pretty well in Nassau as well. What are you seeing right now for just how people around you feel about him at this moment?
About Trump?
Yeah.
People have had it with Trump, too. I mean, Trump and Biden are both, as I said, underwater. And again, they both represent, at the current time, the same old politics. The president's going to have to break through and start presenting the message he ran on in the first place, which is about working together to get things done, which is the race that I'm running as well. And I think, quite frankly, if I win this race, despite very difficult odds because of the Republican machine, because of the Republicans have been winning things for the past 3 years out of my district, running on this message of working together, I can go to Washington and give a speech on the floor of the Congress, because I'll get sworn in with everybody in the room. And when I get that opportunity, if I get that opportunity, I'll stand before my colleagues and I'll say, wake up! People are sick of this. Let's get something done to serve the people on immigration, on crime, on cost of living, on the things people care about.
All right, former Congressman Tom Suozzi, thank you very much. It's great to see you again. We'll see what happens. Good luck to you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate being here.
I guess I'll start big picture here with these comments about NATO. John Meacham, just as it pertains to, well, there is no precedent, is there?
No. The post-war, World War II, the post-World War II order, which actually, for all of its imperfections, maintained a basic peace, has maintained a basic peace, has tended to check the appetites, the ambitions, the designs of dictators, is under a threat from within. This is Abraham Lincoln's birthday, Mika, which I'm sure you'll be having a cake later with the great man about this. But Lincoln said early in 1837 that if America ever falls, it won't be because of a foreign force. It will be because of an internal enemy, an internal foe of the Constitution and the Declaration rising up. And that's what's happening. And it's very clear, and we can go on about it, but the question before the country could not be clearer. Do you want a president who defends the Constitution and an order that has proven successful, creating American prosperity, creating American security? Or do you want someone who is irrationally and for his own purposes trying to tear that down? And that's the question we face. It will be framed again and again and again. And this is just today's framing.
Right. But, John Meacham, what I see happening, which, again, could be a real sort of turning point in our history, is you don't just have people at these rallies, cheering on these incredible statements, anti-democratic statements, to say the least. But now you've got the House bending to his will and impacting legislation that perhaps both parties and would have been very constructive at this point for our country and for our foreign policy. And Donald Trump is able to squash it. And it appears that cancer is now spreading into the Senate.
It's a very interesting analogy. The ancients used to talk about the body politic because the health of the city, the health of the country was as important as one's own health. Corruption meant disease, not graft. Crisis comes from the word, the course of a disease where a patient lives or dies. It is a disease. And we don't do ourselves any favors by pretending it's not and wanting to be kind to our 401k Peter Millar wearing Republican friends who are enabling this. There are not at this hour two functioning political constitutional parties. There just aren't. Mm-hmm. And you can argue about the left and say, oh, but what about? But there's nothing on the left that's not recognizable within the vernacular of American politics. What is clearly visible on the right, and you've just pinpointed it, is an illiberalism, and that sounds fancy, but an un-Americanism, if you want, that is removing them from that conversation. And so the only way to fix this, I think, is to beat them. Beat them at the ballot box, and then, you know, they can react poorly and try to change the rules. But that's the way to do this, because all, as Lincoln said, all men act on incentive. The reason you saw Senator Rubio and others out there is because they think that's going to help them.
So you said beat them at the ballot box, and I'm going to put you in an awkward position because I know you have some ties to the Biden administration, helping with speech writing at times. But I think you can do this. I'm curious how that happens in an environment right now where the airwaves, whatever you called podcast airwaves, websites, publications are littered with disinformation. And I know this was the case in the past, but I think it's at a new level where you have several networks, but primarily Fox News, and they're on a loop all day about Biden's age. They're on a loop all day about Biden talking about the Mexican president when he was talking about Egypt. You know, they're on a loop all day about that. And the loop on Trump, this is just a fact. It's not, you know, and it happens to play into our outlooks, but you could run Trump's gaffes and you wouldn't have enough time in our 4-hour show. And yet there's a totally different standard for both. So how do you beat them at their game? How do you vote them out when people are being fed a lot of bad information?
The question is what people are taking that information and ingesting it, right? And by and large, it seems to me, you have a base of folks who have made a decision that Trump is their heroic figure and they're going to follow him no matter what. Those are not, I hate to say this, they're not reachable people, right? They've made a decision. And the only way they change their mind is if I think if they lose. The people who are reachable are very few, right? They are probably not watching this conversation. It's probably a couple of million people spread across 7 states, 6 or 7 swing states. And so the story you tell them is the full story of what this choice is about. And President Biden, as you say, he's my friend. I help him when I can. There's no secret about that. I think that he has proven himself again and again to be a hugely effective president. I have no anxieties about his capacity to make important decisions for the country. His political question is having me say that has virtually no effect. He's got to show it. You can't tell voters things. You have to show them. And so you tell a story. You have a president engaged in the life of the country in which his capacities, which are formidable, are on display. And those voters who are going to save us are these independent and swing voters. And when I say save us, I mean that. And I didn't think we'd be sitting here talking like this 4 or 5 years ago. But just, as you say, just look at what Trump said yesterday and what he's going to keep saying. So the important thing to me is tell the story of what has made America great, which is a devotion to the Constitution, to the Declaration, and to sanity.
You see what's going on here?
It's a courageous stand. I mean, you know, maybe it's not Rosa Parks on the bus, but, you know, this is pretty important.
Oh, this is amazing.
You know, I don't want to get all preachy about this, but you go back. What did Jesus say?
Yeah.
I was thirsty and you gave me water. That's what Larry did here. And I'm just wondering, are Republicans like really going to push getting this guy into jail?
How about that, huh? Wow.
The story gaining momentum, too. Political figures, celebrities across the country reacting to Larry David's brave stand.
Can you believe that? This Larry David they're talking about seems like quite a fellow. Well, that guy is.
He's really something.
We know better.
Our cameo appearance in last night's new episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Earlier this month, we had Larry David and co-star Susie Essman on Morning Joe to preview the new and final season, which airs on HBO every Sunday night at 10 and then streams on Max. Now, before that, I got a chance to visit Larry's production offices in California. Take a look. Let's start with your corporate jet. That is nice. That's very good. Is that just when people come in to intimidate them?
That is so low. Joe, I don't even know where that came from, okay? I don't know where that came from. Let's move on, okay?
We'll move on. You've got Hitler books here.
Yeah.
Let's go from the corporate jets to the Hitler
Maureen
books.
Dowd sends me Hitler books.
Now, why does Maureen send you
She
Hitler
knows.
books?
She knows I like movies about Nazi Germany. Corporate jets, Nazi Germany. Can't end this.
No.
And that's me. Look how happy I am when I first started doing stand-up.
Did you ever think that your dream of being a comedian wasn't going to work?
I didn't even start stand-up until I was 27.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no dream of being a comedian. I was a hopeless case in my 20s. I didn't know what I was going to do. My parents sent me to a therapist. I remember once when I was a private chauffeur, I saw a guy from college walk by the car, and he was wearing an immaculate three-piece suit and sees me in this chauffeur's outfit. And we locked eyes. He couldn't even bring himself to nod or do anything. He just turned his head and continued walking. And that's when I knew that something had to change.
I started comedy in like 71 or something, and he was just hanging around. I didn't know at the time that he lived a block and a half away in a place that defies description. Anyway, but he was so funny, Larry, on stage. And he liked my work too. And we became best friends suddenly. I mean, we did everything for each other.
You guys were both pretty subversive comics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what changed?
I decided to, go into to become a stand-up.
And that didn't go well, though, either, did it?
I didn't bomb all the time. I'd say I bombed frequently. It was unpleasant.
How did you get into the writing? How did you get into SNL writing?
Well, I was on this show in the early 80s. They got me from my stand-up. There was a show like Saturday Night Live. It was called Fridays.
Oh, Fridays.
Yeah, so I was on that. And I think from there, that's how I got the writing job on SNL. And it's 1984. It's about 6 weeks into the show. The sketches that I'm writing are doing well at the read-through. The writers like them, the actors like them, producer doesn't like them. They do a few in dress rehearsal, and they all get cut before air. And then finally, maybe around the 7th week, they cut another one. This is 5 minutes before the show, and the producer's sitting in his director's chair.
Yeah.
And I walk, can I curse here?
Yeah.
And I went, this show stinks! It stinks! I hate it! I'm done! You! I quit! I get home, and Kramer, the real Kramer, the guy who the character in the show was based on, he goes, what are you doing here? Because I'm supposed to be watching the show. I say, well, I had a fit and I quit. And I go, so stupid. I just cost myself X amount of dollars, and I could live on that money for 2 years, because let's face it, the stand-up wasn't going to support me. And he says, well, you should go back in on Monday morning and pretend it never happened.
What should I do? Maybe you can just go back. You mean just walk into the staff meeting on Monday morning like it never happened?
Sure. I take my seat at the meeting. He's going around to each writer, asking them what they're thinking about and working on. He does 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he gets to me. And I go, well, I'm thinking about a sketch. And that was it.
It worked.
And it worked.
Let's do it.
Yeah, for the elevator man.
Come here. Come here. Oh, look! Here, wait.
If you take a job in a new building, would you want there to be a stool in the elevator?
Well, I wouldn't want to sit if I was taking people up or down, but I guess if I was waiting in the lobby, it would be okay if there was a stool. And
How come, no chair? What? I couldn't help but notice that you don't have a chair. Have they ever offered you a chair?
No.
Would you like a chair?
I suppose if they gave me one, I'd sit down.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about Seinfeld.
Sure.
Because people say it's a show about nothing, but it was actually inspired by shopping in a Korean grocery store. Is that right?
After we performed Catch a Rising Star, we were going to split a cab back to the West Side. This is Jerry and I, and we stopped off at a grocery store before we split a cab, and we're in the store and we're talking the way we always talked about various products and things like that, and then because NBC was interested in Jerry doing a show, we both going, oh, this should be the show. This is the show.
This will work.
Yeah.
Don't you know the difference between salsa and salsa? You have the salsa after the salsa. See, this should be the show. This is the show. What? Yes. Just talking. Yeah, right.
And you've got, and I love this, you've got on your wall the initial reactions.
They recommended a pass on the show because they didn't like the characters. They didn't like anything about it.
So who's the NBC executive who actually deserves credit for...
The guy's name was Rick Ludwin.
And he, what did he see in it?
I don't know. I really don't know. But he saw something. I don't know how these things work.
Right.
But that's how the show got on.
I guess the same thing for Curb. Who had the idea at HBO to go, let's do this mockumentary, and then, again, had the foresight to say, this is going to work?
Well, when Chris Albrecht watched the special, it wasn't even a pilot. There was no intent to do more than just a special.
And this was like the idea you returning to stand-up.
Yeah, I hadn't done stand-up in 10 years, so it was sort of like a mock documentary of me going back to stand-up.
$276.
Yes.
Like 5 phone calls or something.
Well, it's actually phone calls, and it shows a number of movies right here. You can take a look.
What'd you watch? Oh, okay, fine. What are you doing? Give it to me.
No. HBO pays for the porn. Please call someone about the porn, please.
I can make a call right now about the porn.
HBO will cover the porn.
I don't care.
Okay,
I don't care.
it.
So I invented some scenes, which became sort of what Curb became. And Chris Albrecht watched it and said we should do this as a series.
Is there a tough part of this? Because I know with Curb, I know you're going to talk about how great it is. But what's the tough part of this?
It's like 3 jobs, and it takes about 18 months. It's about 6 months per job. The first job is the writing. I do that with Jeff Schaefer.
The show's written 3 times, basically, right? We do an outline, and then every scene is a live rewrite. Like, there's just people are talking, and you steer it and whatever, but that's where the show gets written in. There's lots of different options, and then we write it for the final time in the edit room. We have to actually make a choice about
on which one you're going to do.
Yeah, which way.
So the actors just they do improv. They'll do maybe 4 or 5 different takes.
These editors are brilliant. I mean, most editors, here's a line, they say, there's 2 takes, they check it off, they're home before lunch. This, we are stitching and weaving, and if you can't see someone's face, we're
I mean,
looping.
the editor has to sift through like 5, 7 takes, and then pick out sort of the all-star team.
And you look at him,
yeah.
I'm exhausted. He's the Rembrandt.
It's been
an exhausting time.
I usually have a dress code for him,
Yeah.
but he obviously didn't abide by it
the
today.
socks.
Yeah.
Look at his socks.
We ordered this kind of for the table, and I feel like you've gone way over your appetizer allotment at this point.
My allotment?
Well, there's 3 of us. We each get a third.
Who makes up that rule?
It's an unwritten rule.
Oh, my God. There's 2 Larry Davids. Holy sh**. I always loved the fact that he would always get famous actors who maybe haven't acted in years. He would bring them back and give them their deserved moment of glory on a great Curb episode. I mean, when he had Shelley Berman.
How's Mom doing? Oh, well, you know how people do. So we brought her back. You know, your mother, she got sicker, and we had to bring her back to the hospital.
She's in the hospital?
Yeah, well, not now.
So she's feeling better?
No, well, in a way. Nobody goes on forever and ever and ever.
She died?
Yeah. Dead. She's dead. Well, one day was a funeral.
Well, why wasn't I at the funeral? Why didn't you call me?
She told me not to bother you. You know.
She told you not to bother me? What's that supposed to mean?
This scene is really funny. It is. Shelley Berman is so
amazing.
Brilliant in this scene.
And he's looking around
Yeah.
and he's all
well,
nervous.
your mother said not to bother you. I'm not going to live forever.
So when you set this up, though, it's not line by line by line. You just give Shelley or anybody else a couple of...
We completely winged it, yeah.
Cheers. Larry, you can't look me in the eye and toast?
Look you in the eye?
Yeah.
Towards what end?
Because that's what people do. They
outta
look each
here.
other in the eye.
What is this, a seance? We're raising people from the dead? Come on, give me a break.
No, we're connecting and having some intimacy.
I don't need to connect. We're all playing versions of ourselves. Susie's playing a heightened version of
Sort of amped up.
Yeah, amped up.
At 11.
Jeff Garland playing a version of himself. Mm-hmm. And everybody else, Cheryl, everybody else on the cast, a version of themselves tweaked a little bit. But JB is not playing him. He's not playing himself. He's not playing JB Smoove. He's playing a character.
For $1 a minute, $5 minimum, I will sit in that booth while you go and use the bathroom. You order, I gotta go? Yes, I gotta go. Okay, thank you. Before I gotta go. Get on out of here. Hey, excuse me, you just spat on my shoe. It's a spit shine. It's like, stop. What?
He's making this stuff up.
Right.
Okay, in a character.
Yeah.
That's way harder than what I'm doing. And, I mean, he's so brilliant.
Oh! What the f***? Oh! That's artificial fruit! What the f*** was the food on the table? I don't know. I saw it at Jeff's house. I liked it. Put the f*** on the table. I don't f***ing get this.
One of the things I love about Curb is that the laughing is genuine. So when somebody says something funny and people are laughing, it's because it's funny.